So in the 90s, there was supposed to be a Spider-Man movie played by Leonardo Dicaprio, and which was rated R, and like it got rated R because there was some wild sex scenes, including spider web bondage with Mary Jane. Wild overall. It's like it has like some dark moments. A kid literally died. I'ma talk about it all. I found the script online and wanted to make a little visualization from all the other films so I could like kind of show you how it's supposed to go. So the script opens with the usual Peter being a nerd. It's actually pretty similar to Spider-Man 1. You know, you got Aunt May, you have his parents being killed, and you have Mary Jane, and in this movie, Peter and Mary Jane are doing a school project which puts them together. But one of the interesting deviations that this film does is when Peter gets bitten by a spider, he actually ends up mentally entering the spider world. As the script puts it, he has a David Lynch bio-horror montage of the spider world. This film wanted to treat Spider-Man as like half spider instead of a man with spider powers. It's pretty interesting. He then goes to bed. The spider dream comes back. But today he wakes up in a spider web hammock. I think this is a metaphor for Peter's puberty and his changing body. It's like basically a wet dream. When he wakes up, he shoots liquid silk into his face. That's kind of wild, being a metaphor for a wet dream. All the familiar beats of Spider-Man 1. He's learning his powers, blah blah blah. But here's what the film does differently. We then cut to Carlton Strand. He's rich, powerful, and he's introduced as someone bigger than Trump. And if you don't know Carlton Strand, it's on purpose. It's created just for the movie. He's essentially a different version of Electro. He has a lightning accident that allows him to make a powerful charge like an electric eel. But then this scene plays out where we see Cordelia come into his penthouse and he really wants to touch her. But when she takes off her robe, wearing a rubber wetsuit, he runs his fingers over her. Strand says, "I want you, not rubber." He kisses her, then she begins to convulse as if she's being electrocuted and passes out. He stands here in misery and isolation. He can't touch anyone because he'll kill them. Since electricity comes out of him, he can't really control when he does it. He can only control how powerful he does it. So he can't feel intimacy. It's a perfect way to contrast Peter, being that he's finding his first love with MJ. Everything's going great. And then cut back to him and he can never have like a real relationship. He then zaps her, bringing her back to life. She says, "I don't know how much more of this I can take." Another cool thing that this film does is that since Spider-Man's broke, he tries to make some money off of like the whole spider thing, and the way he does that is like becoming like a micro celebrity. He does tricks, he shows off like his cool acrobatics and all that. He ends up going on a syndicated variety show where he meets Cordelia and she gives him a note saying that there's others like you and giving him an address to go to. Trying to get more info, he tries to get into her limo, but a man named Boyd grabs Peter, but Peter punches him, but his fist goes right through him as if he's made out of sand. Yup, Sandman's in this movie. He is like casually in this movie. They just like throw him in there just cause why not. Then Sandman beats the hell out of him. And like the way they write this is wild. And then fast forwarding a little bit, Uncle Ben happens. Oh yeah, this Uncle Ben scene has some like no words in it. There's some words we don't use now. I'm certainly not saying it, but it's in this movie. It was a different time. And then the film sets up J. Jonah Jameson hating on Spider-Man as usual. Oh yeah, a difference in this movie is that Peter doesn't work for the Daily Bugle. Just clearing that up. But after losing Uncle Ben, Peter now goes after criminals with a vengeance. All those years of being helpless, not having a father, no older brother to protect him, makes him want to become the world's older brother. And we get a montage of him saving people, helping people out, saving lives. And we see people say that Spider-Man isn't a white dude, he's too down. Like everyone claims him. Italians think he's Italian, gays think he's gay, everyone loves Spider-Man. But then a scene that complicates this, he sees a cop beating up a guy, so Spider-Man intervenes and webs up 2 cops. Now he becomes a wanted criminal. As a felon, he can't make public appearances. He can't make any money that he used to have. Peter feels outcasted, persecuted, answerable only to himself, but he himself doesn't have the answers. Everyone's against Spider-Man. Cops, criminals, J. Jonah Jameson. But then he goes back to school. The iconic MJ and Spidey kiss scene happens. But like, instead of Spider-Man pulling up his mask, like MJ kisses him on the mask. Like, it's kind of whatever. Later, he's met by Cordelia and Mr. Strand. They say that they're looking for others like him, like Boyd. Remember Sandman, how he was once poor and now he helped him, gave him a job, made him a better life, gave him guidance, all this. Strand wants to take Peter under his wing. Peter needing a father figure, he kind of goes for it. But then he tells him he can have his fill of Cordelias, that he can have all the women he wants. He says that people honor competition, that we honor winners. But then every time there's a winner, there has to be a loser. Strand sees Peter as a misunderstood outcast he never had. Someone who understands him, cares for him, doesn't think he's a freak. But then when Strand explains how he makes his money, i.e. stealing, he doesn't like this. They become enemies and they fight. And remember, Sandman's at the scene, so Peter gets clapped up again. Spider-Man loses a lot in this film. He's just constantly getting beaten. Now, Strand makes it his mission. They fight Spider-Man, they beat his ass, then Spider-Man escapes. Later, Strand buys the TV station and gives Jameson's unlimited money to make fun of Spider-Man. His plan is to make the world hate him as much as possible. He gets thugs to dress up as Spider-Man and rob stores. Eventually, no one trusts Spider-Man. And then Aunt May becomes sick. She needs to go to the hospital, but the medical bills are just too much. Later, he's doing the regular Spider-Man patrol and he catches some thieves. But then after he catches them and beats them up kind of, he realizes they're just some kids like himself. One of the kids runs trying to escape, slips off of a fire escape. Peter tries to catch him, but he can't. The kid falls on the street and dies. Peter realizes they just needed some money just like him. The lines between good and evil keeps getting blurred. Yo, this movie's wild. Kid just died, what the fuck? Skipping a little bit ahead, he sees some drug dealers selling drugs and he busts them. We actually get to see Spider-Man actually being Spider-Man, you know, helping out the neighborhood. It's very cool that this movie has like a ton of this. But then after, there's a big bag of cash just sitting there. The criminals are webbed up and the cops are just gonna take all the credit for it anyways. And Peter thinks about stealing it. You know, Aunt May is sick, all the medical bills. He takes it, but then he realizes he's no better than Strand. He's no better than the criminals he's catching. So when he's flying, he lets it loose. All the money just flying into people's hands. Then Mary Jane does an interview talking about Spider-Man. Earlier in the film, Spider-Man saved her, so she has a positive experience with Spider-Man. She goes to a private spot, she's sitting thinking, and then Spider-Man drops down to her. Spider-Man asks her, "Do you still trust me?" Mary Jane kisses him, and Spider-Man grabs her and Spider-Man webs to the Brooklyn Bridge. I think I'm gonna read the spider bondage scene verbatim just because I want you guys to truly understand how wild it is. The scene is set at night. She puts her back against a girder. Spider-Man stands before her. Then Spider-Man says, "Courtship among spiders is highly ritualized. It varies from species to species. The male spider may circle the female or wave his front legs to signal that he's not prey." MJ takes a deep breath. Her lips trembles, her knees weak, her eyes are steady, gazing upon the silhouette before her. She doesn't move or speak. He moves in closer. In certain crab spiders, the male will attach strands of silk to the female, tying her limbs. Since the female can break free at any time, the bonds have only a symbolic significance. Mary Jane says, the male must be very bold to take such liberties with a predatory female. Then they kiss. Basically, this nigga's into bondage. Ties her up, does things to her, they fuck. I wonder how graphic it would be because it's rated R, they can do whatever they want, but who knows. Then it cuts to the next day at school. MJ now likes spiders. You know, she wild. But then MJ gets captured by Boyd and Strand. Peter goes to his penthouse to investigate. Peter finds Cordelia dead. This time, Strand didn't have the time to jumpstart her. In his lair, all the TV show Strand's smiling face held in pause from a VCR. This is from the 90s. It tells Peter to meet him at the World Trade Center. SWAT busts in to see Spider-Man over the body. It's a bad look. He barely escapes. He comes to the World Trade Center, top floor, and Sandman's there. Grabs Spider-Man, and Sandman's just too strong. Strand says that Spider-Man can't save the world because people can't save themselves. Strand says, join me. And then this scene's kind of weird. I don't know. Strand grabs MJ and kisses her. She slaps the shit out of him. Strand kisses her again, but this time at a higher voltage. Her head falls back. But Strand is just doing this just to intimidate Spider-Man. Strand zaps her back with a defibrillating... I don't know how to say that. He jumpstarts her. Brings her back. Spider-Man breaks free. Peter tackles MJ, scoops her up, diving right through the grass. Puts her in a safe space. MJ says, I love you. Spider-Man says, cool. He comes back to Strand. Strand points to the window, this time putting his arm around Peter's shoulders, just like how a father and son stare down the world that they own. Strand says, join me. Together we can shake this 2-bit planet down for its last nickel. Take what's rightfully yours. You have been given a great gift for a reason. Do not squander it. Then Strand points to a tarp the size of 2 refrigerators. Boyd pulls back the tarp to reveal money, neatly stacked, piles of hundreds. Then Spider-Man musters up all his force. He explodes the Sandman into loose chunks, which rains down around the room. He dives out of the way. Strand fires lightning bolts across the other roof, blasting debris into the air. Sandman pounds each other mercilessly. Peter's beat down, his costumes ripped in half. Strand grabs 440-volt main cables. He feeds off the power. Then, as Sandman pounds Spidey into semi-consciousness, he hurls him off the roof, but he catches a web, pulls him back. But then Spider-Man sees that Strand is making a mega blast. He's charging his blast up. I don't know. Spider-Man shoots a web at Sandman and throws him into the bolt. He kinda killed him, not gonna lie. Sandman becomes a smoking lump of melted glass. I don't know if it's a lot. It's kinda unclear. Peter gets blasted by Strand. They fight. They fire bolts of lightning at each other. Spider-Man fires his webs, but finally one web sticks. Spider-Man jerks him forward. They're both falling off. Spider-Man sends out a web to pull him back up, but it's too late. He slams into a steel column. He's bleeding out badly. Peter picks him up. Strand says, what's your name, kid? Peter says, Parker. Peter Parker. Strand says, Peter Parker, so what are you, senior in high school? Yeah, I graduate next week. Unbelievable. That's like the worst death scene ever, bro. I hope this was like a first draft. That was horrible. But then remember that big tarp of money? The way Strand makes all his money is that he took half a cent from 1 billion accounts all at once all over the world. So there's no way to like really give it all back to the rightful owner. So when he's flying, he lets it loose. All the money just flying into people's hands. Then Peter and MJ get an A on their project. Everything's good. Then MJ figures out Peter's Spider-Man and they date. That's the end of the movie. So I wanted to give some of my thoughts on this script. It's pretty decent. I didn't like the villain's motivation. I know it's tying into like the whole animal theme of the film, but like it just felt weak. I did like how much the hero and villain contrasted each other. Aside from Sandman being kind of like pointless to the film, he doesn't really add too much to the theme. He's really just like a victim of Electro. But aside from that, it's a pretty decent film. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you guys think this would have made an actual good movie? Leave a comment down below. And thanks for watching this far into the video. I hope you liked it. Leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff.